Okay, this is part 2 of the video on the TriMax commercial grade max security. I have, with much difficulty, replaced the stock drivers with the drivers from my dead Master 410 LOTO lock. And I did discover, so there's no anti-bypass wafer in this, so I thought it should be easy to bypass. However, I have been unable to. I can get to the actuator, but I can't get behind it, because unlike an American, you can't, there's a dead zone, right? So if the actuator isn't tight against the plug, there's a gap for you to get into. And if not, you can, the way my tool has been modified, I have a sharp point on it, so that even if it's not, I can jam into the face of the actuator, turn it a little bit, and reposition, get in behind it. Except that I just missed it. Oh. Well. Oh, there it is. Just lining up wrong. But on this one, there's no, the core's loose in there, or completely, but there's no real dead zone on the spring. So the actuator is actually hard up against the plug, and the shape of my tool or something, I cannot quite get behind it. I still would recommend, if you had one of these, to put an anti-bypass wafer in it. But so just a quick addendum, what I found out about the bypass here, so I'm just going to insert this clip in here. So for the bypass tool to work, it has to slide down the keyway and come out pretty much flush with this face. Slide behind the actuator on the lock and rotate it up. So with that one having spring tension holding it tight against there, that becomes very difficult. With the proper shaped tool, I'm sure it could be done. But one other thing I discovered was, on this particular lock, if you rotate the clip to a position like that, where it's covering the bottom of the keyway, the tool can't clear the warding and the clip to even exit. So it would take a specialized tool specifically for this lock, which I doubt anybody is going to make, to be able to bypass this. So I don't even think I'm going to stick a wafer in this one. Leave that clip rotated like that. Just put it back together. So it works smoothly at the moment. That took a lot of work, because I'll show you when I get in there, but the tolerances on this lock for the key pins are terrible, and the edges on the holes in the plug that were drilled are really sharp and rough, and that would be why they needed rounded off driver pins, because they need to be able to ride up over those because the key pins weren't sitting flush with the end of the plug. So it did take some filing to get the sharp-edged master pins to work in here. It's pretty sad when the master pins are so much higher quality than these. But things that make this, you know, those pins would have been one thing in a different lock. They would have been absolutely terrible. They gave me a little bit of a problem because this thing does have a spring right from the start, and the actuator has a drag. It's hard to explain, but it feels like the O-ring and the Ingersoll, as far as the drag that it imparts, both ways. There's a little drag, just probably from crappy tolerances in manufacturing. It is a cheap Chinese built lock, but the loose core and the drag and the spring all combine to make those, you know, they, as you saw in the last video, they did give me a little bit of a difficulty. So now, with the sharp edges on the spools and serrations on the master lock pins, combined with the spring tension and the drag on the core, actually combined to make this a tricky pick. That's not the first time I picked it though, so don't take that for yeah, if you know what you're doing, once you've done it, just like any lock, it gets easier, but it took me longer the first time. I'm sorry I didn't capture that on camera, but I actually had many problems when I was trying to convert this because I ended up dropping the pins in the carpet down here. My wife and I spent forever trying to find them. That was a mess. Anyway, thank you very much to my wife. She is such a big help. She puts up with all of this mess I create over the house doing all of this, and she was down here in the carpet searching for little brass pins in our carpet has these it's kind of like a low shag, but it's the fibers in it. There's like tan fibers, and then intermixed in there, there's these brass colored, sort of metallic, shiny fibers in there. So finding little brass pins in with all those little brass colored fibers is not easy. Up. Alright, so now you can see, let me zoom in. You should be able to see the filing I had to do on there. I don't like having to do that, but those were so terrible. To give you an idea, originally they would have sat about like that. They were about a half a millimeter low. So the rounded factory pins rode up over them without much problem, but the sharp-edged Master 410 pins would just jam up in there. So put a spool in one, the serrated in two, spool in three, spool in four. And 5 and 6. Oops. All right. Well, good enough. You get the idea. With an anti-bypass wafer installed, I would call that a usable lock. Physical toughness, it's pretty good. Not excellent, but pretty good. And if they would just put in some spools, it would be a decent lock. Anyway, thanks for watching. Remember, keep it legal.